If they don't like it in the West Bank, they can leave, I would say.
Well, if they don't like it in Israel, they can leave.
Well, but to where?
Or not all people who voted for Trump obviously vote for him because they support all of his ideas, everything he supports. Some of us, like myself, I voted for him because I want to preserve certain American rights and freedom.
I, as someone who support him, if someone were to come and shoot me,
That's up. So you defend what you said then? That's the thing that you stand by?
no.
Yes, that's
No,
definitionally, yes, that's how the caliphates work, yes.
In your mind, is moral behavior more consistent in religious societies than in secular ones? So, just an example we wrote, the United States with a secular government versus an Islamic nation such as Yemen or Afghanistan under Taliban control.
I think that it's hard to analyze. This is on, right? People can hear me? Yeah? Okay. I feel like it's hard to analyze whether or not a country is better just because it's religious versus secular in terms of morality, because you can see even among countries that are relatively secular, like your Scandinavian countries, some people point to those and say they have a better morality because of how they deal with welfare or redistribution. Or you can look at countries that have a similar religion, like say Saudi Arabia or, as you pointed out, Afghanistan, and you can see that their approach to morality seems to be quite different. Or you can look at the same religion like Christianity, and you could like pre or post Enlightenment or pre or post Reformation, and you can see significant differences there. So I feel like you have to speak with a bit more granularity when you talk about a society, and whether or not it's moral or immoral, and doing it just through that lens of religion on its own, I think is a little bit reductive, I would say.
Yeah, to say the least. Would anybody like to come down and make a comment on what Stephen just said, or ask a question yourself? Anybody? Raise your hand and we'll have you come on down. You right there. Go ahead and state your name in the microphone.
Hi, I'm Kurt. I'm actually the vice president for the Atheists For Liberty chapter here at the university. I think you gave a pretty good answer to that last question, so I kind of wanted to go on to a different topic. Your position on Israel has historically been interesting. You make a lot of criticisms of pro-Palestinian activists for giving an inadequate sort of explanation of the events of 47 and 48. So sort of bracketing that, two questions. The first is, what would your positive advocacy be for like what should be done about the ongoing, you debate if it's a genocide or not, but at least an ethnic cleansing you've conceded before in your debate with Hassan or the after viewing for it. So what would your affirmative advocacy be? And then would you be willing to condemn what's going on there right now as something which is cruel, unusual, and needs to be stopped?
In terms of positive advocacy, the thing that I've always said about the conflict is that both sides have to be willing to make some painful concessions, and I feel like a lot of the international pressure infinitely incentivizes both sides to continue on their current course. If you're a part of the pro-Palestinian movement, the international community has gassed you up into thinking you don't have to concede on literally anything that you would have negotiated pre-67. And if you're Israel, the international community has offered you basically only harsh words, which means you should just keep trying to conquer more and more of the West Bank. So I feel like both sides right now are in this weird position where it would be stupid for Israel to stop because they've only made gains, and it would be stupid for Palestinians to give up anything on paper because they still have the whole world open to them. So I guess when I look to advocacy, what I really look is there has to be like a painful concession that both sides are willing to make, and the international community has to agree to kind of like force both sides to start making progress in that direction. Because right now I think there's too much incentive on both sides to continue into perpetuity. In terms of like, would I condemn anything there? I mean, like, I condemn people when they do things that they shouldn't do. So, I mean, I think with the recent war, I think there are definitely criticisms for Israel. There are some events that are almost unimaginable. I think the bombing of the WCK trucks was pretty bad. The individual, like, multi-step bombing of, like, I think it was 3 or 4 different trucks that they did. Obviously, I think a lot of the conduct on October 7th was probably unacceptable from Hamas, but I feel like when people are looking for condemnation, they're not usually looking for anything that is, like... I don't know, as intelligent people usually just looking for you to take a side on it, and I think that it's a little bit too complicated to just to stake out like a singular position on it. Yeah.
Well, I don't think it's actually that complicated, right? I mean, you're willing to call Project D or whatever it was, and it was Project D in the aftermath of 1947, the initial sort of conflict there, and the ethnic cleansing which occurred then when they burnt over 500 Palestinian villages and sort of led to the Nakab. You're willing to condemn that as ethnic cleansing, but not when they say, we're going to force them out of the north, we're going to force them into the south, and then we're going to force them beyond that. Right, which
I depends how deep into foreign affairs you want to go. I don't like the term ethnic cleansing. I think it's especially applied pre-91, pre-Yugoslavia or whatever. I mean, like, I'll condemn things insofar as if you're killing civilians with the purpose of killing civilians, I don't think it's good. In terms of Plan Dalit, which was arguably it was the mass expulsion of Palestinians from villages that they lived in Israel in 48. Some people argue that that was the goal all along. I don't think there's ever been compelling evidence of that. Other people argue that the Arabs would have done the same to the Israelis. I mean, I think even the Arabs would tell you that. What's the problem with the history
you've
is
called it ethnic cleansing in the past.
I don't think I ever have. I hate that term. I think it's a really
Pull up
silly.
the quote if you want. I got the clip.
Okay, sure. I mean, there might be a clip of me saying something akin to this, but insofar as like the definition of ethnic cleansing applies, I mean, I might have said it before, but the term ethnic cleansing, this idea that you're expelling people from some area because of their ethnicity or whatever, it fails to capture a lot of the history, like at the time, like things that were happening between, I think it was India and Pakistan, things that were happening in Turkey at the time, with big population transfers or sometimes even genocides. It just doesn't get you very far. I feel like when people bring up the term ethnic cleansing, what they're trying to do is they're trying to invoke some level of like normative badness, so much so that you were forced to condemn one side or the other and say that they're like completely in the wrong and they have to leave it. It doesn't progress the conversation. It does the thing that I was saying earlier, where it just makes the conflict intractable because one side is so obviously wrong and the other side is so obviously right that you can only pick one, and it's like, well, this is never going to happen, obviously. So
well, then we can try to look at like active, like feasible policies which you can use to resolve it. And you've criticized a right to return before across the entire not Palestinian state. I mean, I would call it that, but across the entire region. And there might be something to that. Obviously, you can't have like a total displacement of the people who like currently live there. But in situations like the West Bank, would you support a right to return to the areas which have been like overwhelmed by settlements?
Would I support a right to return in the areas that have been overwhelmed by settlements? So
in the West Bank, the areas which have been, blockaded off by walls, they've set up checkpoints, they've completely removed any Palestinian presence in those territories. Would you support the people who have been displaced from those locations being able to return at the expense of expelling current Israeli settlements?
Yeah, so for my position, and there might be other positions that you could take in negotiating some final peaceful settlement, I think that when I talked earlier about how both sides probably need to make some painful concessions that they're not willing to make, personally, I think either the mass expulsion of Israelis, which would qualify as an ethnic cleansing under the definition that you're using also.
Not from the settlements, no.
Why would that not be an ethnic cleansing?
Because the settlements are predominantly a proactive settler movement, right?
Yeah, but how is it? But wouldn't it be an ethnic cleansing to clean the Jewish people off of those
but
places?
It's not because they're Jewish, it's because they're settlements. That's the issue.
Careful.
No.
Because then Israelis would say they didn't
cleanse
cleanse Palestinians in 48 because they were Palestinians. They did it because they were at war with all the surrounding states and these people that could have.
Well, that wasn't their own justification. In Project
But it was the justification.
No, in Project Dalit, in the documentation, like leading up to the conflict, they explicitly stated that the purpose was to expel Palestinians from their villages, to destroy the villages and to bomb Palestinian.
That might have been something they said prior to 48, but
no, they said that during 48, in April 1st, 1948, the OG documents, the tactical documents for Project Dalit, explicitly stated that the goal was to expel Palestinians from the territory.
Yeah, but that's like 10 months into a civil war.
No, it wasn't 10 months.
The Civil War started in 47. Yes, I know that the independence started in 48, but
it wasn't a civil war in 47 because there wasn't an Israeli state in 47. They only declared independence in March of 48. November 30th, 47th is when the UN signed
adopted Resolution 181.
Yes.
I'm aware of that, but there was a civil war that had already started a year prior to Israel declaring independence, and then the other Arab states coming in.
How can there be a civil war if there's no state?
Because everybody knew that when the mandate was expiring, which it was scheduled to expire, and the Jews were there, and they had already been floating ideas for adoption of that partition plan, that obviously there was going to be a huge uprising prior to.
But we didn't see something on the scale which you see in April, right?
Also, because again, I don't want to. I guess we litigate 48, but all I'm saying is that like I think that the mass expulsion of settlers from the West Bank, I think that is a concession that Israel should be willing to make for any kind of like lasting peace there. I don't think that they can maintain everybody there, or if they do stay there, then it has to be like in a one vote, one state thing where they have the same rights as the Palestinians there, which I imagine all the Jewish people would probably leave anyway. So that would be a concession I think Israel should be willing to make if they want an actual like real long-term peace thing. I would agree with that.
But in the past, you've objected to ideas like that. You say that like if we were to have like sort of a one vote, one person type thing, not just in the West Bank, but one state solution, one person, one vote, that Israelis would react violently to that because they would be suddenly outpopulated by Palestinians.
They would, but in the West Bank, that's different than doing it through all of Israel, I think. If they don't like it in the West Bank, they can leave, I would say.
Well, if they don't like it in Israel, they can leave.
Well, but to where?
If it was a democratic state, then there shouldn't principally be an issue. The idea that like a state needs to be ethnically homogenous in order to operate is like this snuck-in assumption here.
It's not a snuck-in assumption. It's the de facto existence of basically every Arab majority state.
Not even necessarily that, right? When you look at like I don't know, for example, Afghanistan, that is not that's a non-homogenous state, which is able to. I mean, Afghanistan doesn't really operate. We can take Pakistan as a better example here. It's an ethnically non-homogenous state, right?
But religiously, I think these places have they have like a top-down, basically theocratic rule.
Yeah, no, I'm not a fan of theocracies in general.
Sure, and I'm not saying even whether you are. Listen, if people want to,
they shouldn't sin there.
Okay, wait. So I guess, do you think that if So just to be clear, if Israelis decide to leave the West Bank because they don't want to be there, I'm okay with that because I think that they shouldn't be there anyway, and that would be one of the painful concessions they have to make. But for you to say that if they don't like Israel, they can just leave, it just seems weird when there are some it's like 24 Muslim states, there's like 50 Arab states, and like for the one Jewish state, you're like, well, if they don't like that, they can just.
Well, my objection would be to the idea of an ethno-state, right? That's the objection here, right? The existence of homogenous states isn't an issue, right? Like, I don't know, Bhutan is fairly homogenous.
When you say what is an ethno-state in your mind, what does that mean?
Something which is defined around a specific ethnicity, that this is a state for this ethnicity, right? So like, I mean, Israel explicitly defines itself as the Jewish state, which is an ethno-religion, right?
Yeah, but I mean, there's different ethnicities that are encompassed within like what it means to be Jewish, like an Ashkenazi Jew versus a what is it, Marahi,
well,
or whatever the people from the Middle East.
You can bracket different categories all day. You can be like, oh well, Germany has sub-Germans, right? So it's not.
These aren't. I'm just saying that. If a country wants to exist to protect its identity or its character, in the United States, we have quotas for what we allow for different countries. Obviously, in Israel, it's a bit more strict. I mean, I think that there's probably good reason for them to feel like if they were a minority in that country, they would probably have the same fate as every other Jewish minority in every other country.
It just feels like it's a dangerous logic, which we don't apply to a lot of other states, right? Like if we were to say like, Germany should shut its borders to all immigrants. Germany's for the Germans. We would go, whoa, that sounds familiar, right?
Well, but then the question would be, what is the motivation for that?
Well, the motivation is that there's a group of people who are currently like living in horrible conditions who have been forcibly expelled to that location at great human cost to themselves.
Well, the question would be, do you think that Jews would feel safe living in a minority state controlled by Arabs?
It's like, would white South Africans feel safe in South Africa after the end of apartheid? And I know you dispute that Israel isn't apartheid.
Well, hold on, that was a huge pivot. It's a very simple question. Do you think Jewish people would feel safe living in a minority state that's run by Arabs?
I think any unsafety they feel is because they're scared of like that what they did to them might happen to them. Right, which
okay,
is
so I'm going to ask a third time. Do you think Jewish people would feel safe living in a Jewish minority state that's run by Arabs?
Yeah, I mean, they historically they have, right? If you look at like Iraq prior to the end of the monarchy, like right after British decolonization, there was a large Jewish population there, which is fine. It's not fundamentally some Jewish-Arab conflict. It's just because one has gotten so horrific that they're scared that again, what they've done to them.
Okay, so then one final time, we'll see if we can answer. Do you think Jewish people would feel safe?
Yes, I do. I think they would feel safe in living in a predominantly
I think the
Arab
majority
state.
of Jewish people in Israel would feel differently about that, and I think the last 100 years of history has shown us that probably wouldn't be the case.
If you look
and
at
the fact that you literally keep
years,
saying over and over, why would I go back 1,000 years?
If you look at the history of like Arab-Jewish relations, they've been relatively fine until recently.
They literally haven't. The only reason Palestinians are in that area is because of the caliphates that have conquered like the greater Middle Eastern region. What do you mean?
There weren't expulsions of like large Jewish populations.
There weren't expulsions. They were locked into one particular piece of land and served like as subservient to the Muslim population. I mean, or you can have the last word if you want.
Not historically though, is my point. What?
Explored the topic already.
Yeah.
Your question.
Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you for asking.
Anybody else?
It's my turn there.
Thank you.
That's important. Oops. That's the first passionate attendee question. I was going to cut it off earlier, but I know you seem very passionate in how you were answering it too. So I was trying to see where the line was here. Yeah, that was just attendee question number one. So I think this is going to be a very interesting night. So I'm going to give another question pertaining to what we originally talked about. Are concepts like forgiveness and grace better exemplified under a Christian worldview, or if you think a secular or secular humanist worldview?
I feel like my personal perspective is I would say that most human morality is kind of like intuitive in terms of how we arrive at it. I think that religion can sometimes encapsulate some of that morality in religious doctrine. I think that secular people can sometimes encapsulate that in kind of like cultural practice. Man, a lot of my answers to this are going to be really unsatisfying. I'm sorry. I feel like when it comes to understanding things like forgiveness or grace, I think it comes down to how much a person is willing to like intellectually engage with whatever moral system they're with. I think some religious people have a very good understanding of forgiveness and grace to where there's a story that I tell. I was part of the archdiocese or diocese in Omaha for the Catholic Church, And I remember that we had, between even individual Catholic churches, the sermons and everything would be very different. Like I think some would be very conservative and others would be quite, I don't want to say liberal, but like, just whatever. We had this guy, Father O'Leary, I believe, who gives these, he's very much like a brothers for others, like forgive everybody kind of guy. And I remember he was invited to give to do the mass at one of the more conservative Catholic churches. And this was like in the weeks after 9/11. And I think he started off with, there's like a brother among us who needs forgiveness and compassion more than anybody else. And it was Osama bin Laden. And apparently a lot of people were really upset. They never invited him back.
That's going to be one of the funniest moments to clip out.
Yeah,
right there.
Jesus. But yeah, quite literally. But so, I mean, like there are people who can engage with these concepts really well. There are people that engage with these concepts very superficially, like especially when it comes to like forgiveness or grace. Oftentimes I find that people really only offer it to people that they feel didn't do anything wrong in the first place, right? It's kind of like that subreddit, Am I the Asshole? And it'll be like, am I the asshole because I hit somebody today? And the post will be something like, today I was in line and this guy, said he was going to murder every single person in the store and he was punching his child. And so, I hit him across the face. And do you think I'm a bad person? And everybody's like, no, you got him. Like, good job. So I find that a lot of like forgiveness and grace kind of works like that. But yeah.
Guess we'd have to see how the audience feels about that. Would anybody like to go ahead and comment on that or ask a question of their own? Gentleman in the back right there, our friend John. Give a round of applause for him. Another big help to this organization, 5 years strong.
Alrighty.
How's it going, John?
Hello, Stephen. How are you?
Pretty good.
So you just espoused, I guess, support for the ethical principle of defending other people, essentially. If someone's committing violence, you espouse the notion that a violence in turn against a violent person is justifiable. For a little bit more background, you've also expressed a significant disdain for people who are Trump supporters, people who voted for Trump in lieu of allowing someone like Kamala Harris to win. So
someone like who?
Kamala Harris.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, allowing the alternative. See, because not all Trump supporters, or not all people who voted for Trump, obviously voted for him because they support all of his ideas, everything he supports. Some of us, like myself, I voted for him because I want to preserve certain American rights and freedoms, like the right to bear arms. Because I think that the right to self-defense is fundamental to human dignity. And I think that in order to preserve such a right, ultimately, Kamala Harris's stated intentions on multiple circumstances was to enforce mandatory gun buybacks and assault weapons bans and things like that. So I'd like to ask what your opinion of I guess the action of choosing the less bad option in the context of voting for like someone like Donald Trump in order to stop Kamala Harris from winning. In light of everything that you've said in the past, especially some of your sentiments where you were, in my opinion, a little bit gleeful at like a person who got killed at a Trump rally.
Well, I definitely wouldn't want to be gleeful about any violent acts in front of a Trump supporter because you guys definitely never do that. So, I mean, you have to weigh the pros and cons of any candidate. I mean, there's going to be a collection of issues that you support and a collection of issues that you don't support. That's going to be true of anything. I don't like that. There's this weird cop-out that people use of like, I don't want to support the lesser of two evils when, like, tautologically, definitionally, you should always support the lesser of two evils. It's literally less evil. Yeah, so I don't understand why people are like, I wouldn't do that. If you present any situation to somebody, like if I could cut off one of your fingers or two of your fingers, you probably choose one finger, even though it's still bad. Like so it doesn't really make any sense to say, I can't choose between the lesser of two evils, especially when the outcome, like you said, is inevitable. Like one will win. I guess, is your question more related to like gun rights and self-defense, or is it more related to the broader concept of like owning the totality of a candidate that you support, I guess?
Well, I guess one area we could take this is we could discuss sort of the rubric by which, because you've already rejected this notion that you can't not choose the lesser of two evils. Every decision we make is choosing the less bad option. Even if it's an option that is extremely good, it's still less bad than a bunch of other options.
Yeah.
So I guess my question for you is, how would you evaluate, I guess, which of the candidates of the last election was the less bad or worse candidate from your point of view?
I think there are times when making that evaluation can be really complicated when you're getting candidates that might represent a wide variety of values across different spectrums. I think it would be really difficult. I don't think the last election was difficult. I mean, I would say that when I look at the things that make America what I would consider to be is the best country on the planet, so whether that comes down to our individual rights and freedoms, whether that comes down to respect for rule of law, whether it comes down to our place on the international stage, I would say that, or the well-being of our economy or anything else, I would say that in all of these topics, in every conceivable way, even when it comes to gun rights, I would say Kamala pretty farly outshined Donald Trump. I've seen Donald Trump say some pretty crazy things when it comes to gun rights. You know, he was a huge fan of like really oppressive red flag laws. I think he had a conversation with Pam Bondi about that. He did the bump stock ban for whatever reason, I guess because of the Vegas shooter.
But his judges overturned that.
They did, but I don't know why we would give him credit for that when nobody gives Biden credit for killing affirmative action when judges overturned affirmative action.
When engaged in this calculus of the less bad option, I'm not just weighing the specific policy decisions of the specific person involved. I'm also weighing what the overall viewpoints of the administration that they're bringing with them will be. And overall, this current administration is one of the most gun-friendly administrations, even though Trump himself doesn't have the most stellar record on that. I mean, they're basically eviscerating the ATF in whole but name right now. Ultimately, and also I'm pretty happy about what they did to USAID, honestly. But
but these would be other things that aren't related to gun stuff. I think the ATF is pretty good, personally. I don't want to see the ATF eviscerated. I think being able to run a trace on a gun that's used in a crime, I think is probably a good thing. But I mean, these might just come down to individual, I guess, stances on gun stuff. Like, I'm a big fan of firearms, but
so what is the boundary of the right to self-defense? I guess in your estimation, because ultimately, it doesn't make any sense to assert that a person has the right to self-preservation if they don't have a right to self-defense. It doesn't make any sense to assert that a person has a right to self-defense but doesn't have the right to equip themselves to actually effectuate such a defense. Right? It's such a right to self-defense would clearly be a lie. Right. So ultimately,
I mean, you have to be careful when you say like a right to self-defense allows you to, effectuate that right, because we can easily imagine scenarios where you take on the right to self-defense, but it's in a way that's so socially harmful or destructive that we would say, well, you probably shouldn't be allowed to do this. If somebody's at your front door and you could set off explosives,
is a right that you do not have the right to effectuate a right at all. It's like if you supposedly have a right to a certain thing, to do a certain thing, but you don't have the right to do the things necessary to do that thing, can we actually say then, honestly, that the person has the right to do that thing?
Well, yeah, because it's probably going to be in somewhat of a gradient, right? Like if you take away the right to own firearms completely, even that wouldn't take away technically the right to self-defense. There's plenty of other ways you can defend yourself without a firearm.
What defense do you have as an unarmed person against someone who is armed with modern weaponry?
Well, you don't have to be unarmed. You can use a knife. You can use it. I'm just saying that conceptually.
Bring a knife to a gunfight?
What?
Bring a knife to a gunfight?
Well, depending on how close you are.
I mean,
I'm just saying that just because you don't have a firearm doesn't mean you've lost the right to self-defense. There are people that defend themselves without firearms all the time.
No, you've just lost the right to equip yourself to defend yourself effectively against someone who is comparably armed.
Sure, but what I'm saying is that it's all a gradient, right?
Yeah.
Like you haven't lost the right completely just because you don't have the maximal enjoyment of that right? We wouldn't say that like if you're in Europe you don't have the right to self-defense because they can't have the same, firearm.
Well, actually, I would say that in Europe.
So then you would agree right now in the United States you don't have the right at all to self-defense because you can't own like a fully automatic rifle, or?
Well, actually, you can own a fully automatic rifle in the United States.
It's
you just
prohibitively
have to pay the
burdensome,
tax
I would say, right?
Well, it's $200, but
and then you have to buy.
And then you have to buy the.
What's a fully automatic?
Yes.
Yeah, these are thousands and thousands of dollars for these
those
firearms.
they tend to be expensive. And that's I think kind of the point is they're trying to price people out of exercising a constitutional right.
Yeah, but I'm saying we wouldn't say that you lack the right to self-defense just because.
Well, it's an infringement on the right. I mean, I agree with you. Yes, there's always sliding scales,
yeah, that's
but
all I'm saying.
there's a point at which you've slid the scale so far as to effectively render exercising the right ineffectual.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think that where we're at right now with our firearm restrictions I don't think we're there.
Yeah, we aren't,
Yeah.
which I'm grateful for.
Yeah.
Which part of the reason why I voted the way I did.
Sure. I don't think Kamala would have ever. I don't think we would have lost our guns or anything under Kamala.
I mean, she did promise to do mandatory gun buybacks, so you can't really buy back something that was never yours to begin with.
Sure, but I don't think she would have the political capital or the will to get it done. It never happened under Biden. They didn't even get close to it, so I feel like it wouldn't have happened.
Fair enough. Thanks for chatting.
Yeah, thanks for chatting.
All right. Continuing onwards, this is either going to be your shortest answer of tonight or one of your most unique answers.
Okay.
Should religious beliefs influence public policy decisions?
Yeah, of course. Like if you believe strongly in a religion, I mean, you should obviously vote on the things that you feel are morally correct. And I imagine that religion is heavily influencing your morals, right? So, I mean.
Now, the reason why we wanted to ask this question is because also the demography change of the country, right? So the United States is becoming more of a secular nation by a factor of 10. You know, you've seen this a million times already over the last 10 years. More and more people are calling themselves atheists, agnostics, non-religious Americans, or even people that just don't want to go to church on Sunday and they're never going to tick a religious box when the Pew Research Center or another organization asks them their affiliation. That's becoming more of the reality in the West, where we're trying to solve issues more with a secular lens because of the demographic change. More and more people are just not seeing religion as a solution to certain problems, or you have people that are part of so many different sects of various religions to where there can't be a common unity amongst them anymore because of that just decreasing in religious affiliation. So under that situation, do you think that, I guess, through the marketing from a policy analyst or somebody in the federal government or a state legislator holder or whatever, should religion still be really emphasized to get people on board to support certain policies or certain actions, or should future policy work be done in more of a secular way based upon this reality?
I mean, I guess it depends on what you mean by religious versus secular. So, for instance, if you're voting like difference between like pro-life and pro-choice, like your understanding of when a human becomes a human or when it becomes worthy of protections is probably going to be heavily influenced by your religious belief. So, is like an anti-abortion bill, is that like a religious bill? Or if you think that like you shouldn't be allowed to murder somebody, is that because you believe, religiously we all have a right to life? And so it's hard to like tease out because religion kind of creeps into so many different areas of your life. It's hard to say like you can't use your religion at all when you're deciding this. And I'm sure, as an atheist, I'm sure you've heard it said a million times like, oh, well, if you're not religious, does that mean you have no morality at all? You think everybody should be able to murder everybody? You're like, well, that's not actually true. But you can see like a religious person is probably getting a lot of their prescriptive things, which are important for policy because you're telling people what they can or cannot do from the religion.
I guess I'll try to frame it in a different way as well. Like so the pro-life movement, for instance, I've told plenty of pro-life atheists that they should become the new heads of the pro-life movement if they really want to show that being pro-life doesn't automatically equate to being theocratic, that you might have a secular biological reason for, in their view, right, if you're pro-life, protecting human life, protecting the sanctity of life, right, to make the issue more nonpartisan, to get Americans of various stripes on board, based upon as well the shifting demographics. Like the stereotype automatically, like you listed abortion as that issue based upon a stereotype that exists, that in order for you to be pro-life, that some people believe that in order to be pro-life you must come from a religious place.
Yeah, I mean, that's a question of strategy more than anything else. If you lived like in a heavily religious town, then you're probably better off playing the religious arguments. If you're trying to get people in San Francisco or LA on board with some pro-life movement, you're probably better off doing the more secular arguments. So yeah, I would say that's like a question of strategy and tactics more than any kind of like moral question, I would say.
Does anyone want to debate that topic or give comments of your own relating to it, or ask Destiny a question of your own? You right there. Yes, sir. You can come right on down here and sit right next to him. What's your name?
My name is Chase.
Nice to meet you, Chase.
Nice to meet you.
Here you go. Hey, how's it going? How you doing? Pretty good.
So I wanted to present a few quotes from today that you have just said, and then I have a little objection to what you said.
Okay.
You said, I condemn people for doing things that they should not do. And you said, if you're killing civilians for the sake of killing civilians, then it is bad. Do you stand by both those statements?
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
Okay. And then my first question is, what are your biggest objections to Trump and his beliefs in general?
That's a really broad question. My biggest objection is, I guess, is that I just think he's really stupid. I don't think he has a good concept of how economies work. I don't think he has a good concept of the law. I don't think he has a good concept of literally anything. So that's my first objection. My second objection is more specifically on the law. I think he has a huge disdain for the legal system, and the weaponization that we've seen of the DOJ under him, I think has been unbelievably horrible compared to anything we've ever seen in the entire history of this country. And I think that his conceptualization of economies, especially the global economy, and his approach to just tariffing everybody and everything, and how a trade deficit means we're losing, I just think is comically stupid. I could do a million other things, but we'll go with those three if you want.
Okay. Okay, so let's say that I were to believe all of these things, right? Would you say that it is okay, or you would not mourn the loss if I were to die, right? If someone were to come and shoot me over those beliefs right now, would you mourn my loss, or would you say it's okay to do that?
I mean, I don't think it's okay to kill anybody for their political beliefs in the United States. Not quite yet. I don't think we're quite at that point yet. Would I mourn your loss? I mean, I don't know you personally, so if you're a subscriber, maybe. But I mean, if we're just being honest, I don't know.
Okay, so I don't know if you know where this is going, but I'm going to read a tweet that you tweeted. You said Donald Trump incited an insurrection and then was granted full criminal immunity for possibly all of his involvement. I have zero sympathy for anything that happens to him or anyone who supports him. So I, as someone who support him, if someone were to come and shoot me, you said that that would be wrong. However, someone did go and shoot Corey Compertor during the Trump attempted assassination, and you do not mourn the loss of him. What's the difference here?
I mean, it's very easy to say that something could be wrong, but you're not feeling sympathy for a person because it happened to them. I mean, I don't think something wrong happening necessarily evokes a sympathetic response. No.
Yes, but you can say that at the same time that you would say that that shouldn't have happened. You have never said that that shouldn't have happened.
I think I have said that a lot. You shouldn't be shooting people for political beliefs. I don't think we're at that point in the United States yet. You probably shouldn't be trying to assassinate people at political rallies.
So you do believe that what Thomas Matthew Crooks did was wrong?
He was the first shooter, the glasses guy, right?
Yes.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Okay. That was my question. I did not think that you agreed with that based on your tweets and your comments before. That was my main objection to you. But if you're willing to condemn that, then that's...
I'll say it's wrong, yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
The biggest issue that I have is the obsessive focus on this while the president basically gets carte blanche to say or do anything he wants. Just earlier, I think we had a guy that was, I don't remember if he was hinting towards those comments or not, but was celebrating the removal of USAID. Who knows how many people are going to die from preventable causes as a result of that, but we don't care about any of that. If anything, people just kind of like laugh and make jokes about it. So, I mean, like, what do you want me to say to sit here and condemn, one guy who died at a Trump rally because I guess God guided his bullet there, according to Donald Trump. The sympathy is very low to non-existent for me on that perspective, I guess.
I see that, and I would say that I'm going to finish up here, but I will say that the losses that would be a result of abolishing USAID, I say that will be nothing in comparison to that of what has happened over the past 50 years with abortion. I know you don't agree with that, but I just think that those two things, one's different, one's cutting aid and spending, and then one's actively ending human life. So I just think that's a much bigger deal at the moment.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I understand. Thanks for the conversation.
Thank you.
Cool.
All right. So, over the last 15 years, there's been a big controversy in the atheist community pertaining to churches, how they should be treated, should they be given tax-exempt status, should they maintain their status, rather. It's been an issue between people that have seen churches get away with not following the law, and at the same time, a balance as well with protecting the First Amendment. So not only the Establishment Clause, but the Free Exercise Clause that comes with it. Under this debate that is still happening to this day, and I think it will still continue to happen, but at least to get your take on it, should religious institutions receive government funding or maintain their current tax exemptions?
I don't have a strong answer for this because I just haven't read into the rationalization for it. My immediate gut feeling is no, that there probably shouldn't be tax exempt status for it. But you could very easily counter that with maybe in the state or federal tax code, maybe there are tax exemptions for like any organization that does a sufficient amount of like community work, and all churches happen to qualify for this. Like, and if that was the case, then maybe I would feel differently about it. But I personally don't know the strong form of the argument for why tax exemption is given to religious institutions. So like my intuitive gut feeling is that I don't think they should have that, but I imagine most atheists probably feel that way.
Yeah, typically, I would say the majority of atheists feel that way. There have been plenty of atheists as well that have been in favor of it just because of the enforcement of separation of church and state, that if we have a freedom from religion, we also have to have a freedom of religion to make sure we're not hypocrites, to make sure that we ensure the First Amendment be applied to all people, and then to make sure as well that there's no religious institution or religious group of people, if ever there was a new form of religious authoritarianism that kind of got branded and got normalized in American public life, be treated, treat every other American with poor disdain. So I think that's kind of the counter argument, or one of the best counter arguments that I've seen for it.
Wait, how would that? I feel aren't you treating them differently than when you give them tax exemption? Like, why would that be okay under that argument? I don't understand.
Because every single religious group would maintain the same, would get a tax exemption. So this would not apply just to one particular religious group.
Oh yeah, sure.
Every
I guess I just don't see why you would apply
church,
it to
mosque,
religious
temple, et cetera.
groups as like a category, as opposed to.
Yeah, it's something I haven't seen either. The federal government making certain categories. At least, I've never tried to apply
Like
for tax exemption as a church.
Do they get tax exempt status?
I believe they do. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I don't know. It seems weird, but I mean, if anybody could register as a religion and then get an exemption status, that I don't know. Maybe it's not a big deal. Yeah.
Interesting to see what people think of that in the comments too. Anyone want to go ahead and comment on that, or come up down and ask a question of your own? You, sir, right over there. Yes, you, Mr. Pirate.
All right. I've got a question of the own. Hold on. Excuse me.
Now, what's your name?
Captain Nick at your service.
Nice to meet you, Nick. Thomas.
There should be a captain in there somewhere. It's a very heavy microphone. I like this. I need one of these. All right. Sorry, I gotta pull up my sources here, if you don't mind. Oh, I gotta hold this up to my face. All right.
That was a huge phone. What is that?
Oh, it's for hiking,
Okay.
Got a big battery. Okay. So, my question for you is, and I'm still trying to find the quote here. Sorry. Let me see. All right, so a while back, you said something to the tune of, bro, if I need to go on the sex offender list, I'm taking like 20 other streamers with me, okay? Now, I don't know. I tend to not associate with people who would be on the sex offender list if exposed. So I would like to ask you, why do you know so many of these people?
Okay, well, my first question would be, as a pirate, wouldn't you be friends with a lot of sex offenders? Isn't that
Oh,
kind of what you
no,
guys
no, 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 no. Listen, we have standards aboard the ship.
did? Okay, number one. Number two, okay. I appreciate the commitment to the bit. Where's the eye patch?
Wouldn't fit under me glasses. But I
Number
would like
three,
an answer.
listen, if I go on the list, I'll take 20 other people with me, but until then, we all kind of keep each other safe. It's like a Epstein Island rule, I already saw what Trump did to Epstein. I don't want to be the next one to go, so I got to wait for the hammer to fall on that, I guess.
That's fucked up. So you defend what you said then. That's the thing that you stand by.
Hold on one second. Yeah, the Mossad says yes. I stand by that completely and totally. 100%, unequivocally, I stand by exactly what I said, yes.
All right, well, George Soros, he sent me up here. I got me Soros dollars for coming up here. I do have one more question for you, though, if you don't mind.
Okay, what do you got?
All right, so if you take a ship, right, and you replace all the boards in the ship with different boards, right, new boards, is it still the same ship?
I don't know. I'd have to ask my friend Theseus about that one, I guess. I'm not sure.
All right. See, I can't get an answer straight out of anybody. I mean, Charlie Kirk couldn't answer it. Destiny couldn't answer it. We need some more Philosophy 101 students in here, to properly answer us the question.
Wait, do you think there's a proper answer to it?
I do. See, I think if you
Wait, can I guess, actually?
Sure.
My guess would be it would have something to do with the time or the duration in which you change the planks. As in, if you were to change out every single one instantaneously, you would probably say it's a different ship. But if you were to change one over some duration of time, I imagine you wouldn't say it's a different ship.
So, not exactly. My answer to it is if the ship is used as a ship, right? If it's not just a bundle of boards and planks inside of a museum, right? But if it is sailed, then in the process of, you taking all these boards out and stuff, then it is the same ship, right? Because it has maintained its seaworthiness and ship-like status the whole time.
But that's just the universal category of ship rather than the particular ship itself, which is what we're asking, right? The replacement of the boards isn't asking if the well, but that's what we're asking. Any ship at sea would maintain its ship status, but we're asking if it would be that particular ship after replacing all the boards, right?
See, if you have a ship, right, and it has no captain, I'm going to get a little bit philosophical here if you mateys don't mind. So if you have a ship and it has no captain, no crew, it's just sitting in a museum, is that really a ship at all? I mean, it's just a bundle of planks and boards. You need a lively crew. You need a bunch of mateys. You need, where'd I put it? Hold on. What you need is some grog. So that's what really makes a ship, right? So if you use the ship as a ship, right, then it remains to be the same ship, right? But if it's not, right, if you just change all the planks and boards and whatever out of it, it's not the same ship, right? Totally different ship.
Okay.
I have one more thing to say. Zhao Hong Shu. Thank you, mateys. Who do I hand this microphone to?
back to me. Thanks for your question.
Aye, thank you, matey.
We wanted to use this debate as a way to blow up even more, and I think we just got it. Thanks to Captain Nick right there. Look at that. What a gentleman. Thank you, sir. Okay. Off back to our regularly scheduled programming. All right, we're going to get into our third category that we prepared for on individual rights and freedoms. Should freedom of speech extend to offensive or religiously blasphemous content? This might be the short answer one.
Yeah, I would say insofar as how my beliefs go, I don't think that like offensive or hateful content should ever be rendered like obscene or not, worthy of First Amendment protections. So no, you should always be allowed to be blasphemous or offensive or hateful. Yeah.
There we go. So that was the short one. Anybody else want to come down and ask a question or make a comment? All right, up you there. I like that we have plenty of our volunteers that also want to participate too. It's the least that we can do for literally all the hard work they put on up. So this gentleman has flown all the way here from California and has helped us put this event forward. I'm honored to know the man. And just state, sir, in the microphone, your name.
My name's Jake. Good to see everybody here. My question for you, really nice to meet you.
Hey, what's up?
My question for you is what are the bounds of free speech? As a free speech endorsing organization, we're very concerned with protecting free speech, and the common attitude here is, well, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. Of course, there's those who believe anything that violates religious sanctity, as he prompted you, shouldn't be discussed for fear of inciting violence. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Personally, again, I don't care about anything relating to hateful speech or offensive speech. I do think, and this is a very unpopular opinion on all sides, but I think that there needs to be a really tough look at the media environment and how that speech is regulated, because I do think right now our First Amendment is being abused by people that just want to go out and basically knowingly and intentionally lie about everything.
So you like the model of the UK where they have a government-ran entity that enforces what's free, or you think that...
Are you talking about the BBC, or...?
Yeah. Do you think that, or perhaps what I've heard more of is going to the social media companies and saying, hey, here's a guideline, do it yourself, which I don't think works at all.
I mean, I don't know, because there's not even like a conversation for how to begin to do this, because most people aren't on board with it yet. I just think that the current media environment we live in is the worst it's literally ever been. I think that you have people that are living in entirely separate realities right now. Like if I were to take a poll of liberals and a poll of conservatives and ask them questions about like who pays a tariff, or if I were to ask them basic questions about the state of the economy or the border, I would get totally different answers.
It sounds like you have an issue with the level of education that people have, not
even necessarily
speech.
education. It has to do with misinformation and deliberate lying, basically, on in the media. I think is really bad.
Again, I'm sure you know the follow-up is who decides what misinformation is.
Probably either some kind of board or some kind of cooperation between companies to create some sort of third-party, independent.
And then, of course, the free speech protection. How do you not violate free speech by saying, okay, well, this is true, this is false?
Yeah, I mean, if somebody can show that you were deliberately lying or spreading falsehoods, then there would be...
Do they have to prove intent? That you have an intent to...
Yeah, the intent might be an important part of it, sure. I mean, we already do this with defamation lawsuits, yeah. You could be criminal, or you can have fines and penalties and stuff for deliberately lying about people, yeah.
So again, just so I'm clear on the answer, you think that it should be a government board? It
can be government, or like FINRA is not government, but it's like that financial board exists, in cooperation with all of the companies that it regulates and with the government, but it's not a government company. It doesn't necessarily matter, or I don't necessarily care who does it or who runs it, whether it's the government itself or whether the government facilitates a bunch of private companies appointing people to a board and figuring something out. But the system that we have right now is broken and does not work, and it's not getting better. It's only getting worse. It is rapidly deteriorating, so something has to change quite dramatically. And I'm willing to accept, in the short term, any kind of like negative fallout or faults from that system, and not allow perfect to be the enemy of progress there.
Do you feel like you can still? Well, let me pivot a little bit. Do you think the United States is a bastion of free speech? Do you think we're one of the leaders in free speech on the globe, or do you think that...
In some ways we are, in other ways I don't think we are.
Could you elaborate for me just a little bit?
No, because I don't fucking remember the thing I read. There's like a free speech thing ranking on like the press index or whatever. I don't even remember why. It might have extends to things like whistleblower protections maybe, but right. I feel like for some reason people don't rate the U.S. as number one. I don't remember why, but there's a reason why. But I'll say, like, broadly speaking, I enjoy the freedom of speech we have in the United States. Yeah.
Right. I'm familiar with some of the studies that you're referencing and how we rank similar to other Western countries,
Sure.
like 10th to 15th, so on. Going back, do you think that you yourself believe in free speech, and how do you reconcile your belief in free speech with what you're proposing for some form of censorship?
I mean, I think that freedom of speech can't exist in an area where, like, so much bad stuff drowns out people's ability to
And
speak to
further,
each other.
why has freedom of speech worked in the United States for so long, yet now it needs to have some kind of correction?
I think historically there have been a lot of gatekeepers to a lot of arenas where speech happens. Like, the media typically had editor boards, they had, reporters, they had journalists that were trained to do their job. And now, especially with the rise of alternative media, that's all kind of disappeared. And now you're seeing more foreign intrusion. You're seeing more domestic people that are just idiots that are just, like, spreading their opinion. Just the idea that, like, it's only freedom of speech if everybody can scream as loudly as they want, and anything less than that would be not freedom of speech, I just think I think it's a very reductive or naive way to look at it. Like, if I were to say that there's a room full of 10 people and one guy brings a stereo and he turns the volume up to 500 and, nobody can hear each other talk. If somebody were to come in and say, this guy needs to shut off his stereo, I don't think we'd say, well, that's a law against freedom of speech. Do you think the censorship there is contradictory to your freedom of speech? I'd say, no, it allows the other 10 people to have an actual conversation. Right now in the United States, we have no conversations anymore about policy. We don't have no conversations about anything because it's drowned out by the amount of insane misinformation on all sides. And the idea that censorship would somehow be a reduction of freedom of speech, when I would say right now, we basically have no good speech in the United States. I just wouldn't buy that premise.
Your analogy presupposes that one entity or one leader of misinformation has much more power than the individual, because you gave the example of...
Well, I could say 5 people in a room talking and 5 people in a room with boom boxes, if that makes the analogy better.
Well, I'm just curious, because if you have individuals expressing their beliefs and it's not targeted, it sounds to me like you're kind of saying there should be some kind of difference between individuals versus large entities spreading misinformation, as you call it.
Yeah, I think that media companies should be held more accountable, or media accounts, the things that are claiming to disseminate media or do media reporting, I think should be held to probably some kind of standard. Do you think the speech environment we live in right now is healthy or good in the United States?
Again, I think we have to define healthy good.
How
I think it's negative to the intelligence of the society when you have so much prevalent, as you call it, misinformation. I don't like that term because I think it's used for censorship, which I'm against. But I would say belief in all, different views on subjects that are clear cut and should be, and what happens is it inspires further branches off into madness, ridiculous, and that belief becomes society.
Yeah, I think that's bad. I think we're doing that a lot right now.
I think we're not there yet. The reason I entertain...
Really, just a quick, simple...
Sure.
Can I ask in here how many people voted for Trump? Like, would you raise your hand? I don't know how many.
So if we're...
Okay, wait. And then, so, like, if I were to ask a question, like, how many people believe that, as per Elon Musk, that, like, Social Security Administration was paying out money to thousands of dead people? Nobody believes that? 1 guy, 2 guys, 3, 4, 5? Okay. I think I was in a room with more. Listen, these guys are my fans, okay? So it doesn't count, okay? But if I was in a room with more Trump supporters, I think a healthy amount of people would raise their hands on that. Elon Musk and Trump and his entire cabinet and a lot of the right-wing media. And the problem is that not only is it a lie, because it's just a total lie, it doesn't foster any good discussion about how can we improve things about the government or systems, because it's a stereo blasting noise that's taking up, oxygen in the room. And that's just one topic, and there's like a billion different things that's happening on, and I think it's destructive. I think it's anti-free speech. Like, instead of having good, productive conversations about what can we do about trade, we just have to hear that if we have a trade deficit, it means we're subsidizing a country. Like, it's just not true.
Right.
So we don't.
I think we agree on the problem. We disagree on the solution and the means by which. I don't think it's censorship. I don't think it's having a litmus. I don't think it's a litmus test to say your information is valid. Your beliefs are right, true.
Sure, but what is the solution, or what would you change?
Going back to, you said, is it good for the society? And because something's bad for society doesn't mean I ban it or get rid of it. Or
Sure, but then I'd ask again, what would you change, though?
I think the system we have is good enough, because it's a line, it's a trade-off, right? The trade-off is individual liberty, your right to free speech, and the consequence of that is people believe misinformation. And by the way, another important part about misinformation, what you think is misinformation, somebody else is going to think is truth, and so on.
Sure,
so
but are you an atheist?
now you
Wait,
have,
wait, well,
you
hold on.
have
Are you an atheist here, or are you a religious person?
I'm an atheist.
Okay, so usually as atheists, we tend to, more than other people believe in that objective external reality, and there's some truthful statement, there's some fact of the matter out there, right?
And so
we can't just say
again,
that, different people can have a different perspective on truth.
Right.
That can be true. So, for instance, people can have a different perspective on: do you think that do you think trade deficits with countries are good or bad? There's plenty of different valid perspectives on that. There is no valid perspective where somebody says a trade deficit is subsidizing a country. It doesn't make any sense. Or that where you just invent tariff numbers from other countries and say they're tariffing us this percent when they're not.
You're not going to catch me defending the tariff.
Well, but you're defending the
response.
status quo of that, and that's what a lot of
No,
people
I'm
are starting to
defending
believe.
people's right to express their opinion, whether or not it's grounded in fact or not. I disagree with your assertion that it's beneficial to society to get rid of certain speech that's as
Do you think
say.
the media environment that we have right now is good?
Again, it has to go back to good. What's good?
Well, do you
I
think
think
the
it's
media,
good.
well,
I think it's good. In the
I think the
sense-
media environment we have right now is leading probably, potentially to the end of this country right now.
I
and anytime
disagree
you want to
with-
throw up any
I
roadblock
think
whatsoever,
we've
people
had,
say
we've had extreme partisanship in this country.
it's not. The
before.
problem isn't partisanship. The problem is factuality.
Yeah, I understand that argument. I'm telling you that I don't think it's a valid trade-off to say we're going to sacrifice individual liberty to hopefully, and you don't even know it's going to work either, by the way. You
I
don't
know the current system isn't working.
Yeah.
This is not working what we have right now. This
Right.
is fundamentally, completely, and totally broken.
I know we probably got to move on, so I'll just close on this.
Sure.
I appreciate your opinion. I
Okay.
obviously feel differently. I think that free speech is needed. And so anyway, nice talking to you.
Oh, thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
I'll admit I didn't want to end that one early. That was very fruitful. So we all know you're a big fan of Donald Trump. So speaking of that, the answer you gave. So the Trump administration, they recently created an anti-Christian bias task force, of course, which has sparked recent controversy. Is a secular government inherently biased against religious citizens? Would there be a need for a said task force to exist?
No, I mean, like I said, I would say that religious values should be like an abstraction, or rather, your principles should kind of be like an abstraction away from your religious values.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you believe in a religion, and because of that religion, you believe that things like, say, murder or stealing should be illegal, then the government should be able to talk about those abstracted things of like murder or stealing. I think it's possible for the government to operate in such a way that it doesn't infringe on a person's religious values by just focusing on whatever the particular policy things are. I think that should be, I think that should be more than possible. Yeah, I don't know why Trump. I know why he made it.
That was going to be my follow-up. Why do you think the
don't
Trump
know why-
administration came out with such a task force?
Because he simps for evangelicals, just like he simps like the whole Columbia, Harvard stuff is because he simps for Israel. Like, I mean, it's just yeah.
So actually, I'll ask another follow-up, because this is what's so great. It's like what's with all these other people? It's like an extra follow-up just keeps coming with this. So when it comes to this task force and how it exists, Donald Trump already won. He's in his second term right now. I know that there's a big controversy on if Donald Trump's going to try to get a constitutional amendment passed in order to try to run for a third term, like FDR did, and others had the ability to, at least in the early 20th century. But assuming that we trust what he said and that he doesn't want to do that, even though he might, but just under this scenario, what best reasons do you think you could come up with? Because he already won. He's not even that religious. He's not even that much of an evangelical, right? What other reason do you think there could be for why this task force exists currently?
He just likes to get positive attention, so he thinks a lot of people support him, and it would be popular to do a particular thing that gets him a lot of attention, or even if it's unpopular, he'll do it. I just basically analyze him as a YouTuber. I think that explains most of his actions. It's whatever gets him the most amount of attention is the thing that he enjoys doing the most.
A YouTuber back in the old days.
No,
Before YouTube was around.
Nope, the current day YouTuber who's just trying to get as many clicks and impressions as possible. I would say that's basically explains all of Trump's behavior now, because you're not going to be able to find any consistent ideological throughput on anything that he does. So.
Anyone want to go ahead and either give a rebuttal or ask a question of their own? You, sir. I see you keep raising your hand, too. The only reason I'm picking other people, too, is because you already went first. So once we get to seconds, I'll happily do seconds. Hi, what's your name? Yeah, go ahead and shake his hand. Nice to meet you, Omar. Nice to meet you.
So, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but like with the Palestine and Israel issue, what specific actions do you think we could take to stop the conflict, or Or do you think like a two-state solution is completely like out of the realm anymore?
My idea, I always said that you take like a huge box of nukes, basically, you put them in the middle of Jerusalem, and then you have both sides go into their own corner, and for 2 weeks they figure out what they're willing to give up, and then they come back, and then whoever was willing to give up most, if they can't settle on anything, that person gets all the nukes, and they just bomb the other side. That's what I say.
Okay. But hold on a second. Wait.
I think the issue is, so maybe something like that, but less actual nuclear, more metaphorically nuclear. Like, I think Israel and Palestinians should have to come together, figure out who's going to lead the Palestinians. I don't know if Abbas can do it. The guy's like 120 years old. Have them do another election, have them do another leader, have them come together and negotiate. If neither side is willing to give an appropriate amount, then Israel loses all of their funding from the United States. If the Palestinians aren't willing to give up anything, then they lose all of their international funding and support, and until one people is starved out, and then you just move on from there. If you actually want a solution, there has to be like an impetus for both sides to feel like they need to come and negotiate. Yeah.
I agree with you, but I don't think like right now, like Palestine or like on the international level, they're even incentivized to like stop what they're doing because of like the amount of support they're getting from the United States government, and just like the one-sidedness of like the whole conflict. But like, because earlier when you were talking about like with the like people being brought back from the like the settlements or whatever, and like being like taken out and bringing back the Palestinians, like do you think like a distinction needs to be made, like to first like fix Gaza and then like focus on like the West Bank or something like that, like to make sure like each side gets like a fair treatment? Or like,
as in like the difference, are you separating out like the Gazans and the West Bank Palestinians, or?
Yeah, because I'd say they're pretty like distinct.
I would say that's probably not a good perspective, because I think that benefits Israel quite a bit if they're negotiating with two different parties rather than one combined party. I think ultimately the Palestinians would probably want some kind of combined state that incorporates Gaza and the West Bank at the very least, as opposed to having basically like a three-state solution. I think that would probably not be as good for them.
I agree with you, but like at the same time, like I feel like they're not really like incentivized to like even want to like change. Or,
yeah,
like,
nobody's incentivized. That's the issue. But I would argue that it's because of a lot of the international pressure on that area on both sides.
Then what should the United States do to like pressure them, or do you think we're not even like in the position to like? Well, the pressure, I think it can't just be us pressuring Israel. It also has to be the Arab side pressuring the Palestinians as well. So like the pressure has to come from both sides on both parties to negotiate. What pressure would you say for like the Arab nations to do?
Well, I mean, there were talks at one point, I think, of Saudi Arabia running the Gaza Strip, but understandably, none of the Arab nations really want to get involved with it because it's a clusterfuck of an issue. They're just the problem is that right now, because I heard you say before, like they don't even want to like take Palestinian refugees, I think you said. Well, yeah, because the goal is to keep the number of refugees high so that they have a big right of return, so that they can always outnumber them demographically, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, the number is really important, because if Israel ever feels like they have enough Jews to outnumber all of the Arabs, then they'll just start annexing territory en masse like they do in the West Bank, kind of. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well. No, I have I have a stupid question also. So back to like the trolley problem or so if you have one guy on one side of a trolley and then another guy, and it's a trolley that meticulously gets taken apart and put back together, but there's one person on one side and two people on the other, would you pull the lever to like kill the one guy? Does it matter that it's being pulled apart and put back together? Is that relevant? Yes, because if it's being pulled apart, then it's technically not you doing the action. I feel like it would still basically be you doing the action. Why would it be you doing the action if it's a different trolley? Because I think that the thing that you're in control of there would probably be the process, not necessarily what the thing itself is. Like if there was a trolley problem where there's 5 people on one side and one person on the other, and you pull the lever to go to the one side, but the trolley doesn't hit them, it stops right before, and then a guy comes out and he shoots them dead. I don't think you would say like, oh, well, look, it was a guy that came out and did it instead of a trolley, so I'm not responsible anymore. That's fair. Yeah. I didn't think of that one. Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
All right. So now we're going to get into category 4, treatment of neighboring countries, ethics and foreign policy. So some of these questions were crafted for also a certain other debater being here in the room. So if the language sounds a little weird, like why the heck is this atheist guy asking me another atheist to stuff in this way? It's because the debate was supposed to be a little different. Question number 1 here. Should the U.S. promote American values, individual rights, freedom of speech, etc. abroad? Very first generic question there.
I think it's okay to promote them in like inoffensive ways. So like that Voice of America channel where we just like advertise or broadcast stuff about the United States, or like doing foreign aid and stuff, I think is fine. Aggressive regime change and whatnot, probably not okay. So yeah, but it would come down to the individual policy. Like things that are like an exercise of like soft diplomatic power kind of, I think are okay. Not like sanctioning countries that aren't democratic, but like exporting culture and stuff I think is okay.
Okay, cool. Anybody want to comment on that or have a question of their own? All right, I think it's your turn for seconds here, so you can come on up. Long time no see.
Yeah, long time no see. Sorry, my awaited return here. Yeah, so kind of picking up where we left off. When you were discussing the idea that like Jewish people might not feel safe within an Israeli state where they're outnumbered predominantly by Palestinians, I would say like, well, the view that like Arab populations and Arab populations and like Jewish populations are incompatible is like relatively historically inaccurate.
Okay, hold on. Just to be clear, that is the history of all of the nations of Arabs and Jews that have lived together. Prior to the formation of the Israeli state, there was a mass exodus of Jews from every single Arab state. And pre the formation of Israel, there were massacres literally inside of the mandatory Palestinian area from Arabs to Jews. And then during the reign of the Ottoman Empire, there were also different massacres and pogroms of Jews. So that's just...
But it doesn't contextualize the entire history, right? So have conflicts occurred historically? Yes, right? Like
not just conflicts. It's a one-sided...
Well, yeah,
when
no,
the Jewish
one-sided,
population is a minority in the population, they tend to be abused by the people that are...
But there's also been long periods of history where that hasn't happened, right? Like if we look at Spain, for example, right? A large Muslim population. I mean, they were Berbers, but not Arabs. But that's the same point, right? There was a very large and prosperous Jewish culture there, which you can still observe in their architecture and like the Alhambra and stuff. And so like there's not an intrinsic conflict of identities here, and sort of playing into the idea that like, regardless of what we do, these people are just going to hate each other and destroy each other is sort of playing into like the larger ethno-nationalist arguments.
It has nothing. So ethno-nationalist, this is like a privileged American position that we can take where we pretend that none of this actually matters, because in the United States we do a phenomenal job at integrating a ton of different type of people. For the rest of the world, that's not always the case. And you're never going to be able to go into the Middle East. Like only like a Western white American would say things like, oh, well, ethno-nationalism is wrong. Like if you actually go to the Middle East, or if you go to Palestine, if you go to the West Bank, you ask some people, like, do you guys think you would fuck up the Jews if you guys were the government? They wouldn't give this weird answer. They would go, fuck yeah, we would. They would just be honest with you. Like this is only a defense that people in the West put up. There's a reason why almost all of these Arab majority states are Arab majority. Like they don't have to be ethno-nationalist in origin because the populations are vastly Arab. I mean, like they're never going to have that threat of like being an Arab minority in any of these states.
Again, like just not a minority in a lot of these states, but they are like ethnically non-homogenous, right? Like if you look at Egypt, there's like a large Coptic population. They also haven't been treated super correctly in the last 100 years, but historically they've been a dominant force in the area. And you look like across, again, the large swaths of history here, and yes, there are periods of extreme conflict, and those periods aren't good, but denying the possibility of like an equitable coexistence
like what you just said is not good enough. A Jewish person isn't going to be okay with the possibility of not being destroyed if they live in a single state where Arabs have majority rule, especially when, if that did happen, there's nothing we would do about it, right?
And so it's impossible for there to be like a one-state solution where people are given like equitable access to a democracy, and there's like an emphasis on like international protections from like ethnic conflict.
International protections they would ignore that.
Something like a Truth and Reconciliation Committee.
That would never happen historically. Why would they believe that?
We had an effective program like that in Bosnia. There were large.
Yeah, but this isn't Yugoslavia. This isn't Europe. This is the Middle East, where historically nobody is going to step in if Jewish people are getting killed in their state by Arabs. That's just never been the case historically. Right?
Well, then you would need effective intervention, right? You would need some type of like UN observer, something like that, observer status, and then some like means of ensuring like regular inspection to ensure that.
I'm just the idea that you would tell somebody in Israel the UN will save you. Like this is a non-starter. Like nobody would agree to this. There's Again, if people in the West want to push for it, I mean, you're free to do it. But like, there is no world where Israel agrees to sacrifice itself to create like
you're right.
a
So
state where
it needs to be pressured. And what I would say is that the pressures
there's
here
no
are,
pressure. They would just say, "We'll just fight the rest of the world." Then they'll just keep doing that.
Well, so then what? There's just going to be this one state which these people can never be a minority in this country. There's just going to be this one country with this ethnically exclusive, only
It's
Jewish
not
people.
ethnically exclusive. There's a huge Arab population in Israel.
who are systemically marginalized. Like if you look at like larger like tendencies in like education, access to adequate healthcare, like all of these metrics, I mean, it's similar to the way that
When you talk about like an ethnic majority, you're describing every other state in the Middle East. In the greater Middle East, in North Africa, you're describing basically every other state of people where all of them are pretty, there's usually singular large ethnic groups.
and if like a group of like, I don't know, Nepalese people wanted to move to like Syria and set up a thing there, I'd be pretty mad if the Syrian government was like, hey, Syria for the Syrians, right? Like the issue here is that what you're saying is...
Wait, do you think that governments, like, do you think that Bashar al-Assad would have allowed like millions of people?
No, and he was a bad guy. Like this is like, yes, I think it's bad when...
Okay, do you think that Iraq probably wouldn't allow it, right? I don't think that
these
any
are
of the
bad-
Gulf states.
yes, I think these are
I don't think
bad
any
things.
states in North. Yeah. So, but when you have all of these countries and you acknowledge, all of these other countries that operate on this like ethnic level, and then you look at Israel, and you're like, but you guys aren't allowed to. That's just a non-starter. Like Jews are going to say we're literally going to get genocided if we give up our ethnic majority status. Nobody will help us, which is probably true. Nobody would help, and they'd be like, well, why the fuck would we ever give this up? This is ridiculous.
Well, there's the ability for an effective like state to exist, right, which has representation for both of them in equal proportion. And if you think that like just because,
but it wouldn't be equal proportion. The Arabs would probably start to outnumber the Jewish people like dramatically.
Yeah, but does that automatically include their destruction?
They would say yes, historically it has, and then yes, it would. It would, absolutely.
No, again, only for periods in history, right?
What period? There was never a period where Jewish people lived as equal with Arabs. You understand that, right? With Muslims?
Yes, there was. Immediately following the Muslim invasions, there weren't massacres, right? They were explicitly protected under Muhammad and the laws.
When you say
that he
explicitly
passed.
protected, that means that they were walled off as their own inferior religious group. Yes, that's definitionally, that's how the caliphates work. Yes.
Under the caliphates, there was just an additional tax which had to be paid. There wasn't like mass like pogromization.
They didn't have, correct. They didn't have mass pogromizations. Like we didn't have mass pogroms against slaves in the United States.
And they
but you
weren't
wouldn't
forced
argue
into
that as like
ghettos.
being but they weren't. They did not enjoy the same rights and privileges as Muslims did in the caliphates.
They had an additional tax, but
it wasn't just an additional tax.
Yes,
That
was.
additional tax jizya that they had to pay, that additional tax was part of them being not formal members of the caliphate. They weren't Muslims. They weren't part of the, I think it's Ummah or whatever.
They weren't considered part of like the larger Muslim community.
Yeah,
there.
so they couldn't participate in a lot of places in government. They weren't allowed to fight in the military.
No, but they were able to participate in government. Again, look at the
parts of
Umayyad Caliphate.
In parts of the government, they were. They literally,
the head vizier of the Umayyad Caliphate was a Jewish man.
It's a religious theocratic empire. They can't incorporate another religion into it. That's not how that works. They live as sub people in that they get the quote unquote protection because it would be unethical to kill them.
Well, then how are they able to like rise to the second highest state within the Umayyad Caliphate? Like, explain that.
We're going to give out another 10 seconds, so we got to move on.
Definitionally speaking, regardless of any amount of prosperity they might have enjoyed, I mean, they're going to tell you the exact same thing that Palestinians living, I mean, Jewish people would just say, well, what about Palestinians living in Israel? Like, they've enjoyed a huge level of prosperity, probably greater than almost every other Arab state.
While watching their children die, like watching their communities
Israel
be
proper,
systemically
in Israel
destroyed.
proper?
The Israel
Not in the
proper
West
is
Bank or
built
the Gaza
on
Strip.
bombed out remains of like
And that was built on conquered territory from the however many half dozen caliphates that came before it, and then that was built on territory of the Romans, destroying the Jewish temple and destroying Israel before it. And I mean,
this
like,
isn't long ago. This is
how long ago do you want to go? You want to go back to
living
48,
memory.
so we can go 80 years back, but we can't go a couple hundred years back, or we can't go 2,000 years back, or like, where you stop is like...
The difference is people who would identify as Ottomans in that area don't exist anymore. The Ottoman Empire never laid claim to be like, we're the people who live here. The Palestinians have a 100% justified claim.
The Palestinians absolutely had a much weaker claim than like the Ottoman Empire did. There were no people there that identified as distinctly Palestinian.
There were no people who identified as Ottoman, but there were people.
There
who
were Turkish
identified-
people who ran the Ottoman Empire. They felt very strongly about the country of Turkey.
But they
Egyptians felt
didn't-
very strongly about Egypt. Of course they did. They had a whole revolution after the mandates expired to fight for their individual land of Turkey after I think it was after 48. Like,
Yeah, but the people who lived in the area wouldn't have called themselves Ottomans at the time.
no, they wouldn't have called themselves Ottomans. They would have been broken down by whatever random groups of people that all moved in and out of places at the time. But some people did feel strongly about this, like Turkish people did, Egyptians did.
Like, are you like denying that the Palestinian ethnicity has existed with or without a name in the last 200 years? Yeah, sorry.
Okay, cool.
Sorry, I went over time there again.
Very passionate, to say the least. All right. So we're in the final half hour of this event. Once again, thank you all so much for coming on out. Want to make one little short announcement. Be sure to go ahead and follow us at Atheists For Liberty on all major social media platforms. This is being streamed right now via Destiny's channels. And also, I want to give a big shout out to Modern Day Debate for partnering with us. This is also being streamed to their networks right now. James Coons has done a great job working with us as well. He has been nothing but humanistic and kind in his endeavors. The Modern Day Debate logo is also being showcased as well as ours, so I want to give a big shout out to them too. We're going to be doing a lot more events here at UTK as well. So if you like what you're seeing here right now, this is just a little preview of what is to come in the semesters to follow. So once again, thank you all for showing up. We're going to go ahead and do some more questions and commentary for the next half hour. And then for those of you who have VIP tickets or royalty tickets, we're going to ask that you guys stay behind. So once again, thank you all so much. We're going to just keep this going for another 28 minutes. All right. So getting back into foreign policy in relation to religion. Should religious or ethical values shape our immigration policy? Immigration is a very big, contentious issue, to say the least, right now in our country. But right now, there have been stories that have popped up over the last several months of Catholic charities and Roman Catholic organizations, for instance, pushing illegal migrants to come through our southern border in the name of religious charity, in the name of religious humility, that kind of give people sort of a shield to get past the kind of law and order typical comeback in a debate.
Yeah, I think our immigration policy should definitely be shaped by our values, of course. I think it's important when you talk about immigration that there are distinct categories of immigrants that you talk about. It seems like people are unwilling to do this sometimes, especially on the right. Like, if we're talking about people who are seeking asylum, for instance, like, our qualifications for those people are going to be a lot different than people that are ordinary immigrants who are just immigrating here for work or whatever. That's going to be different than people that are coming for reasons related to family members or extraordinary athletes or, whatever else. I think it's important that our values are reflected in each of these different areas. I think it's not fair for people that are like genuine asylum seekers to place some kind of like economic expectation on them. Like, if we truly feel like somebody is coming here because they're escaping some kind of horrific oppression in another country, then we're not bringing them here to be productive workers. We're bringing them here because we understand that we want to make a sacrifice to help other people because that's reflected in our values. But that doesn't mean that, if we feel like we have too many immigrants here for whatever reason, or if we feel like too many are coming through, that we can't, clamp down on that a bit as well. Because for ordinary immigration, obviously the well-being of the country and everything should be taken into account for that too. So it's not all just a charity program. Yeah.
Well, that is something I know that would definitely continue in the comments, to say the least, as well. Anyone want to go ahead and give commentary or ask a question of your own? You right there. Come on down. What's your name?
Noah.
Nice to meet you, Noah.
Nice to meet you as well. So I guess I'll just ask a question in general.
Sure.
Do you think like the rate at which we're like advancing, like I guess tech-wise, like in the U.S. and in the world in general, is going to lead to like a decline, I guess, in the U.S. or in the world? Because I don't know, it just seems like at the rate at which, how social media is operating in information, it just seems like everyone is like isolating themselves and like, taking these super extreme positions. That's like going to inevitably lead to like massive conflict. So, and if so, like, is there any ways of like avoiding that you see in like the near future?
I think that you just have to have a world where we're engaging a little bit more honestly about like the technology and the follow-up from that technology. Hopefully we'll get there. I think every time there's like a new way of communicating, whether it's TV or radio or the printing press, apparently there's always like an explosion of crazy shit that happens right after.
Yep.
So hopefully within like the decade, people are like, okay, well, in some ways this is probably not healthy, or we need to take a critical look at this. Like, I think in Australia, I think they banned like social media for people under the age of 15. Like, I don't think you can make a Facebook account or something. Like, steps like these are good, and hopefully we continue to take more steps in that direction. But yeah, we definitely have to operate under this new paradigm and make rules that are, I think, fitting for it.
Okay. And then like, I don't know, it just seems like pretty concerning to me because like, I don't know, like one of the major examples today, it's like, I don't know, like I was sitting at lunch and I don't really get like too political at the lunch table, but it's just like, it just feels like, especially like in college, at least like non-poli-sci majors, I don't know about how that operates in poli-sci, but like a lot of people are just like spewing shit that they see on Reels, and it's just like, I don't know if, and especially like for my parents and whatnot, like they can't even tell like what the hell's a deepfake anymore. Like my dad the other day is like sending me a reel of like Donald Trump just like eating the microphone. He's like, you see that shit the other day? It's like, I don't know. But yeah, like I agree. It's just, I don't know. I kind of feel like it's kind of like human nature in a way to like, I feel like we thrive in like small communities, and I think it's like kind of interesting seeing like how the right and the left have kind of like framed themselves recently. Like I think the right, for example, has done a good job of like standing up, like saying like I guess like having this like aggressive approach of like we need to stand up and take back our country, and like saying that the U.S. is like run by the deep state. Even though I completely disagree with that, I think they've used that as a tool to like kind of gain like a kind of like collective like goal. And I think you kind of see that now with like the left is like trying to do that with AOC and Bernie, how they're trying to rise up against the oligarchy and whatnot. But it's like, I feel like that's like a proper way of cultivating a group, but I think it's like kind of concerning that there isn't really a unifying way. It just seems like it's being used as a tool to like kind of fight the other side. Whether or not you disagree with either side, it's just like, I don't know. Do you see any way of like, as of like now being able to like work together as a whole in the U.S., or just like, I don't know, because it just seems like super cooked, and it's like I don't even want to like engage with anything politic wise like while I'm at school, because I just feel like my life is just so much more stable and less like stressful. So
yeah, I mean, it's really frustrating. Like I've lost friends recently over like people that just like, the pattern is they'll send you something where, hey, I saw this clip on Joe Rogan or Candace Owens or something, and you're like, oh God, and they're like, well, what do you think about this? I'm like, oh boy. And then like 6 months later, they're fully, you know, like, how could we go to the moon if you melt in the Van Allen belt? Or, you know, why haven't we found Atlantis yet when there are these huge civilizations that are like right off the beach? And it's like, it's just like the most mind rotted shit in the universe. And this happened to my family members as well. Like my mom will be sending me like reel after reel of like, Stevie, can you answer the question like that this guy's bringing up? And it'll be some ex-FBI informant on some 2-viewer reel that's talking about how like Biden and Hillary procreated and created like Obama in the past, and he like grew up, and it's just like the most unhinged crazy shit in the world. And if I were to like stop on like any one singular point, she's like, okay, but then explain this, and there's like 52 different other reels to back it up, and I'm like, I can't. Like, yeah, you know, listen, believe what you want. But this is what I was saying earlier in the free speech arguments. Like at some point we have to figure out that it's not free speech to have, you know, 50 people all screaming as loud as they can in a circle at each other. And anyways, I would say this is anti-free speech. Like we do not have a good speech environment in the United States right now. We do not have healthy debate. We don't have a marketplace of ideas, but we have a bunch of people that are trying to manipulate the current environment to be the best and biggest influencer they can be. And right now the most successful one at that is Donald Trump.
Yeah. Do you think that only gets fixed if like some shit bad happens? Because like that's like the only way I'm seeing that it like gets.
It's not
fixed.
so much that bad shit has to happen. There's like ways that you learn habits, or like good or bad habits, and one of the things that's important for learning something is feedback. If you get instant feedback on a particular thing, if you make a mistake or if you do something correct. And the issue that we're having is because the issues that we care about are so abstracted away from the things that people talk about. It's hard to know immediately what is even happening, right? Like if I tell you that it hurts to have somebody, you know, like flick your ear, and then I flick your ear, like you'll know very immediately if that's true or not. Or if I tell you can fly and you jump off a building, you'll know, depending on how far the fall is, you know, anywhere from 5 seconds to 15 seconds, you'll know immediately you can't fly. But if I tell you that there were 20 million illegal immigrants that came under Biden, and now the number is as low as it's ever been, I mean, you really have no idea. You're not at the border counting, right? There are people in Pennsylvania with massively strong opinions about illegal immigration, and it's like, when the did you see, you know, a Hispanic brother up here like coming trying to take your jobs? Like, what are you talking about? Doesn't make any sense. And that applies to anything, whether it's tariffs or trade or what's happening in space or what's happening in Afghanistan or Russia and Ukraine or whatever. So hopefully with the tariff thing, we're going to start to see that rolling in as pictures are coming in of empty ports, of, you know, you see the markets sway. Markets will respond fairly quickly to things. That bond yield was very scary for Trump. He responded very quickly to that. Ideally, things will get messed up enough that eventually people will start to see, okay, this doesn't work, and then hopefully we course correct at that point. But yeah, it's a problem when things are so far removed from the actual thing itself. It's hard to see immediately whether or not somebody's, you know, being honest or making a good or bad decision.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then also, do you think education could play a role at all? Because like, I don't know, for a long time I was thinking like, oh, if people are more educated, but it kind of seems like even the educated people are kind of like not even knowing what the fuck's happening. So it's like, or like the framing around it too, because like now it's like who is educated, because like anyone can have or show up on a podcast or show up in an interview. So it's like, do you think managing that might be helpful?
I think there needs to be like really good critical thought, like critical thinking skills that are taught. And when I say critical thinking, I mean kind of like these like metacognitive processes, to where you're saying like, what is a heuristic you can apply to know if somebody is trustworthy? Or how can you know if like how can you get an inkling on if a particular thing is right or wrong? Or who can you trust for, you know, what particular reasons? And teaching stuff like this I think would be really important. But oftentimes, at least when I was going to school, I guess you guys are probably quite a bit younger, but I remember when I was in school, they taught me that like .com meant that it was probably not trustworthy. .net is definitely not trustworthy, and .org and .gov are like the same and very like that was like the extent of the internet education I got. So yeah, I mean, people need to equip students and young people with like a good heuristic to analyze what's going on in the media landscape. I don't know if that's happening in schools right now or not because I don't go to school. So yeah.
And then like one last quick thing, how do you go about like managing like I guess like just trash being like spewed into the media, like for example like on social media, just like management of like AI and whatnot. Like, do you think that will end up being an issue? Because I kind of see it now where it's just like you have like a bunch of just random AI generated shit or just comment sections being filled with bots, and I feel like there isn't really a lot of attention to that, or people are just like even like following it or like thinking that it's real. Do you think like any of these companies should be held accountable if it
but
causes
again,
problems?
it would require like some infringements on freedom of speech. Like you'd have to get people willing to come in and say like, hey, like this can't happen anymore. And then just because of the way that everything played out with the Russian investigation into Trump, like arguably conservatives were the ones that were most equipped to spot conspiracies like this. But despite the fact that there are so many conspiracies you could say about Trump because they're kind of politically bought into that side, they're like utterly silent on it. And the left just, I guess, historically hasn't been as much on the conspiracy side. We don't have anybody talking about it right now. So yeah, but definitely something needs to change insofar as verifying the authenticity of accounts, or even I would say like the nationality of accounts sometimes is important.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, sweet. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks a lot. .gg websites are always trustworthy unless they're talking shit about me.
Food for thought. All right. So we spoke earlier about the changing religious demography of the country, and how it relates to churches and how they should be treated, how policy should certainly be enacted. Is a religious population necessary to maintain a free and moral society?
No, I don't think so. You just have to replace a religion with something else that kind of is like your guiding ethical thing. So some philosophical movement or something. It seems like we have some hole in our heads that's filled by some over-encompassing explanation for how things work. And if a religion's not going to fill it, then something else will. So
have you given some thought as to what specific system would fill that hole?
Nope. I have no idea. The nice thing about religion is a very quick shortcut for ethics, for metaphysics, and for epistemology. Like you very quickly get answers to how you decide what's good and bad, how you decide what's real and what's not real, how do you decide what your sources of truth are. Like religion gives you all of that immediately, and then you don't have to think about that. And those questions suck. Even in formal philosophy, those questions are boring and they suck. So you don't have to worry about it. You can just kind of like live your life. I don't know what the quick and easy fix is from like a secular point of view for all of that.
That's currently being worked on.
Okay,
to be announced.
I'm sure it's been
like a few decades or so. We're working on it.
Okay, gotcha. Cool.
And debating on it and pulling each other's hair out over it. Maybe some wars that'll happen over it too. We'll see. TBD. Anybody else want to come down, ask another question? We got another 16 minutes, so I want to make sure each of you get a chance to participate, especially since we've had to change the conditions of the debate itself. You, sir. What's your name? Tom. Nice to meet you, Tom. Good name.
Hey, what's up?
Nothing much. Hassan, do you think if Israel and Palestine were two countries in Africa and Israel occupied Palestine, you don't think Palestine would have a right to defend themselves?
They probably would, I think, yeah.
If you were the leader of Hamas, what would you do to defend Palestine?
I would probably try to make up with the people in the West Bank as quickly as possible, because having a unified front there, I think, would give them a lot more international legitimacy, and it would make it a lot harder for Israel to kind of ignore them as when they're divided against each other.
That's all, really?
Well, I think that'd be like an important start, yeah, because I think having a divided Palestine, I think, makes it a lot easier for Israel to navigate that situation in a way that is domestically possible for them, because you cannot just point to Hamas terrorist attacks and say, look, those guys are really bad, like fuck them,
And do you really think it was a good idea to vote for Kamala Harris if she lost anyways? Like, wouldn't a protest vote have been better if she was going to lose?
Well, if I know the outcome of a particular thing, that kind of changes the entire question, right?
But everyone else in every other state, except like the Midwest, who knew she was not going to win that state.
Well, I don't know if anybody knew. Oh, you mean like if you're in a state where, I think you should. I feel like generally you should vote your conscience. I feel like the protest vote or the third party vote isn't as good because it obviously you can see that Trump is like riding high on that popular vote win. So I think it probably does mean something. The popular vote numbers. It seems like it matters to people. So you should probably vote who you think is right to vote for.
That's all I got. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
All right. So you were talking about how you were also raised Catholic earlier. I'm also an ex-Catholic myself. This is kind of a juvenile example, but you probably remember this as a Catholic. You were allowed to drink alcohol while being a member of the Catholic Church. Once you received your communion.
Okay, I heard this a lot. We always had like juice. I don't think we ever got actual alcohol. We might have on our confirmation, but other than that, no. So I don't know what Catholic churches or schools you guys were all going to, but they didn't give us.
You didn't get actual wine?
I don't believe we did. No.
Oh wow.
So
I think I got actual wine.
Well,
my taste in alcohol has evolved since then. So I don't know what 8-year-old. I can't really think too far back about the specific taste that 8-year-old me would have had when trying it for the first time in comparison to now as someone who drinks. But like it's a cheesy but funny example about how you have a religious practice that technically is a contradiction to secular law, right? Because a child that receives his or her first Holy Communion in the Catholic Church, is not of the age of 21, or typically not of the age of 21, and yet that is acceptable and permissible in our society, right? We give credence to religion under, some people would argue, separation of church and state to allow that. But my overall question, kind of just using that as a cheesy opening there, should religious individuals be exempt from laws that conflict with their faith?
Oh man, it really depends on the law. Like for the alcohol one, I think that's probably okay. Depending, I don't think I could even craft a general rule for that. I think it would really depend on the. It would really depend on the law, and it would depend on the application.
Like a system of degrees,
something like that. Yeah, because even that alcohol one, I wouldn't be okay with. Like 8-year-olds getting wasted, right? Like that's probably not okay for a religious exemption there. So I think in some forums, I think there could be some kind of personal belief exemption. I think is okay. Yeah, it would just really depend on.
So you think if we were to, there was a movement to be promoted to make America more religious again, you think something like adding alcohol into the picture wouldn't be very helpful for that?
Well, considering that 8-year-olds can't vote, I don't think it would help them very much. No, yeah.
Get your 8-year-old kids wasted again. Go vote this way.
True, yeah.
I know we had a bunch of other people that were raising their hands. Oh boy, we got one very fast hand there. Does anyone else who hasn't gone yet want to comment first? Okay. All right, we'll try to get this done as quickly as possible. So please keep your questions and the conversation here down to 3 minutes. I want to make sure you all get your time to chime on in. We're going to start with you right there. What's your name? Zach. Nice to meet you, Zach.
Yeah, I just have a quick question.
What's up?
I'm going to push back a lot. What do you think? So you've talked a lot about like misinformation and kind of how the whole right and just so many people in America are so deeply misinformed about so many things. I'm curious how you think that would relate to like the issues of moral degradation. So for example, I'm thinking about like in the past week, the lady in North Carolina who like called a little kid the N-word and then raised like $500,000. And now you have like people who are kind of mainstream, like Matt Walsh, for example, defending that. Like, how do we go about combating that kind of moral degradation? Do you think it would be a similar tactic to like combating misinformation, or is that a whole totally different thing?
I would say it's a whole totally different thing. Yeah, like I said, I'm not as interested in speech laws against stuff like that. I mean, I never got paid that much money for saying the N-word, so I think it's kind of ridiculous that. Just kidding. I think that. When it comes to stuff like morality, I think you can have different perspectives or different opinions on that. I think that's fine, I guess. Like if somebody wants to be pro or anti abortion or whatever else, like you can have those perspectives, pro or anti-war, whatever. You can have those perspectives, but. That's fundamentally different than you just can't. I don't think you should lie about it.
Right. Well, I agree that I think like she should at least legally have the right to do that. I mean, maybe because of the kid, it would be different. But I'm more thinking about like morally how 5 years ago I wouldn't have expected someone to have raised that much money like that, or I wouldn't have expected someone like, for example, Matt Walsh is the example to be defending that. And it seems like. I don't know if maybe it's just kind of like a knee-jerk reaction to the, I guess, wokeness or whatever that we saw like 5-ish years ago, or Do you think that this kind of...
I mean, I would argue that, you can make the argument that a lot of perceived moral degradation actually does come from a misinformation environment. A lot of the times people will act as good as their environment allows them to be, and if you can convince somebody that their environment is as horrible as they think it is, or as you want them to believe that it is, then that person, can believe crazy and horrible things. It might be that if you ask somebody about that person raising so much money, their response would be something along the lines of like, oh, well, organizations that taught CRT were stealing billions of dollars from the government and making us hate all white people, whatever they would say about that. And in that world, if you believe that, maybe you do, throw $20 at some racist white woman because you're like, yeah, fuck these guys, fuck the system. But that stems from people lying about conditions before. But I would say, you can't really regulate morality from a government perspective like that. There's some like basic principles around like criminal stuff that you can, but otherwise, people just are probably free to do what they want.
Thanks for the question. All right, I am done with asking questions myself, so I want to go ahead and get more of you down here. Who here hasn't gone yet? All right, let's get you right there. We'll have you go next. Hey, how's it going? What's your name?
Aiden.
Nice to meet you, Aiden.
All right, I have just a quick question. I want to know what you think Donetsk and Luhansk play in a possible peace deal in Ukraine, like what their stance will be if a peace deal is resolved.
Unfortunately, it looks like they're just going to be owned by Russia, I guess. It sucks, but it feels like this current administration has absolutely no desire whatsoever to ask for basically any concessions at all from Russia. It seems like even the the power plant, I don't remember which one or what it's called, but it sounds like even that's going to go to Russia as well. It sucks. I have nothing good to say, but that's just, it's fucked.
Do you think, like, just in an alternate reality, do you think it's like, what would it look like for Donetsk and Luhansk to be like part of Ukraine? Because it's like 40%, like roughly 40% of Donetsk and Luhansk are native Russian, and they already have like a paramilitary like structure that's already been enforced since 2014. Do you think it'd be possible to like for Ukraine to like have these regions without just like unrest and uprising?
If Russia was no longer pumping them full of military personnel or weapons, yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but like feasibly, like, do you think that would be possible? Just like,
I think it could be. Yeah. I think a lot of it. I think the Russian involvement and the foreign investment they've made into fighting in that territory is the reason why from 2014 onwards it's been. I don't even like to call it civil war, but there's been so much war happening there. It's because of Russia's support. If that was stopped, I think they could have it under control.
Yeah. But do you think like it would ever be stopped? Like that support?
There would have to be strong international condemnation and some kind of like military response to make Russia stop doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're kind of saying like if those strict conditions are met, then it is possible for Donetsk and Luhansk, but otherwise it's probably not.
Well, right now, Russia apparently can take over however much of Ukraine they can conquer and hold. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's without people strongly, I guess, interfering with Russia's ability to do war.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, we're going to be doing 2 more questions here. It's nearly 9 o'clock, so I want to thank all of you for coming here. I'll make some little announcements after we are done. We're going to have you, sir, come on right up, and then we're going to pick our last attendee to come on up here. What's your name?
Yasir.
Nice to meet you, Yasir. Pleasure. Thanks for coming.
Hey, man.
Hey, what's up?
All right, so this will be pretty quick. So I just wanted to get your opinion. So when it comes to like public schooling, specifically for K through 12, not like college, one thing I hear a lot is that we're getting stupider, our kids are not listening, we have the lowest literacy rates, and in my opinion, one of the biggest problems is funding for schools, specifically that like a lot of it is property taxes. So if you're in a poor area, well, the school's going to be shit because it's poor, and then if you're in a wealthy area, it's going to be a lot better. Everybody's going to have a laptop. So I just wanted your opinion of what you think can be done, especially when a lot of Republicans are pushing for people to go to private school and charter schools, and they don't give a shit about public schools. So I just wanted to hear your opinion.
Unfortunately, I'm not as well read on why our education system is lagging behind the areas that it does lag behind in. I feel like I've heard and I've read that throwing a ton of money at a school district doesn't always help if they're already like decently funded. For ones that are underfunded, I think there are simple investments you can make, especially related around like temperature control, so air conditioning, and like food availability, like offering lunch and breakfast sometimes to these children. So I mean, where the easy investments can be made monetarily, I think they should be made. I don't personally like the property tax way of funding schools. I think it's a little bit I think inequitable would be the word. I think it's kind of ridiculous that kids can have such different opportunities based on the zip code they live in, because it's not through any choice of their own. But it's really, really, really hard to get cities on board with that, because people that live in wealthy school districts don't want their money going to poorer school districts. But yeah, I feel like a more equitable funding mechanism, I think is important. The Department of Education used to help because they would send money. I think it made about like 14% up of all the school budgets for K through 12 around the country, and I guess that's going to be gone now. So I don't know what's replacing that, but yeah, I don't know as much about education, so I don't have any super strong opinions there about what could be done, other than like I know the air conditioning and the food one, I think, are two basic investments that could be made that have shown good results. Yeah. But I don't think that would fix the problem entirely.
Yeah, another big thing is I've talked to a lot of teachers because I know a lot, and a big thing is they can't discipline kids anymore, apparently. So what do you think could be done about like the culture of like, no, you can't tell my kid he can't throw crayons at someone else?
I don't know. You should just hit the parent instead. I have no sympathy for parents that are like the helicopter parents or don't think their kid can ever do anything wrong. I think that's really stupid. I don't think you should be hitting kids. Like the ruler across the knuckles or whatever is probably too far. But again, I don't know personally how much like disciplining children plays into the problems in school these days. So it's hard for me to say. I have a hard time believing that if a kid came in that was incredibly unruly and undisciplined, that the teacher being able to discipline them more strictly would actually change that much. I don't know if that would even help. In my mind, disciplining kids is usually to remove them from the classroom so that they're not messing with the rest of the kids. But yeah, I don't know 100%. Yeah, unfortunately.
All right, fair enough.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. We're going to go ahead to our last question. So if you haven't gone yet, raise your hand if you would like to be the last person. Let's do it. I like the button, by the way. Oh, yeah. Heathen Patriot, what's that? Wonder what group is giving those stuff out.
Hey, what's up?
What's your name?
Connor.
Nice to meet you, Connor.
Sure. So I don't want to debate. I just want like 3 quick questions to pick your brain here.
Okay, go for it.
So first one, do you think Elon is a Nazi or is it just a bit to piss off the left?
I feel like it's a bit. I think he signals. I think he knows he's signaling, but he does it because he thinks it's like epic and based or whatever. Because he's a fucking idiot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second question, do you think it's okay to say the N-word in private?
If you really want to, if it really makes you happy, then as the master of whether or not you can or can't say the N-word, sure, why not? Okay.
All right. Third and last question, do you think there should be a third state solution?
As in like Gaza and the West Bank and Israel?
Yeah.
No, I think it would be really bad for Palestinians.
Okay. That's it.
Okay.
All right. That's fair. Just want to pick your brain.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
All right. Well, everyone give a round of applause for all of you that asked great questions and for Destiny himself for coming on out. Thank you all. This is just the beginning of what we are doing as an organization. We are Atheists for Liberty, a 501c3 nationwide nonprofit that stands for free speech, free thinking, and freedom for all. Like I was stating to Destiny here, religious demography in this country is changing by a factor of 10. More and more people are trying to seek secular solutions to actually secular problems, where religion is often interjected in the name of either diversity or various forms of authoritarianism that messes with all of our lives, and we recognize that. But we also appreciate the fact that not all of you agree with us. And from this amazing debate that we've had here tonight to also the Change My Mind session, our impossible conversations, as branded by Peter Boghossian, that we had earlier today on campus, I really want to thank all of you for coming out in the spirit of good faith or genuine conversation, really to keep everything happening here on campus. I want to, again, thank our staff and volunteers at Atheists For Liberty who have come out from all parts of the country to make this happen. I want to also thank Drew, the chapter president of Atheists For Liberty here at UTK. I also want to give a thanks to the UTK administration. They have done nothing but have helped us. There have been some communication issues maybe here and there, but overall, they have been nothing but supportive in making up for those issues. And a big thanks to the UTK campus police for coming here and for being around just in case any issues were to arise. And once again, Destiny, thank you so much for coming on out. I know you know a little bit of the circumstances that have popped on out over the last few days. We can definitely get into that later on. But we're doing a lot of great things around this country. We're having this event kind of be the start to us blowing up even further. People are kind of getting sick of the typical woke v. anti-woke stuff. We're hitting the unpause button on the religion debates. We're hitting the unpause button on the future of civilization debates. And we at Atheists for Liberty want to lead the charge in having those discussions and keeping you all entertained and maybe with the ability for you, all of us, to learn another thing or two. So thank you all so much for coming out. Again, give a round of applause for Destiny and everybody else who showed up. Check us out at atheistsforliberty.org. Follow us on social media. Big thanks as well to Modern Day Debate as well for co-sponsoring this event.